At some point in life, some of you have unfortunately experienced an unhealthy friendship. I apologize for the rude expression I will use to describe it. Toxic friendship. Such was Catherine's life. The year was 1846 in Belgium. William Brave Porter was the widowed husband of his beloved and beautiful wife, Mila Breve Porter. They had two beautiful children. Catherine, she was 7 years old at the time, and James. He was 18 years old. The family was suffering from the death of the mother who had a disease, and unfortunately she couldn't resist. So her father decided to buy a new house in the municipality of Ixelles in Brussels, a neighborhood that had a great neighborhood, so that Catherine and his son could have friendships and overcome the loss of their dear mother. Upon arriving at the new home, the family can overcome the great loss they have suffered. A little girl, she was 8 years old, her name was Elise, came with her parents to welcome the new neighbors. In a short time, they became friends, and Elise always came to play with Catherine in her big and beautiful room. But sometimes Elise had strange behaviors. For example, she didn't like Catherine to have other friends, and as the months passed, these strange behaviors increased. Elise fought with other girls who insisted on being Catherine's friend. Catherine couldn't even make eye contact with other girls, despite her young age. Elise was intimidating. Elise was so intimidating that no other girl had the courage to go near Catherine. They were afraid. Elise was always at her side with an angry look. Catherine was very sweet and shy. She was afraid of her friend. She didn't have the courage to tell her father or her brother what was going on. So she grew up, and the only friend she had was Elise. On her 9th birthday, her father gave her a beautiful dollhouse that he built himself. The dollhouse was very large. Made of wood, the dollhouse was a replica of the new house where they lived. Everything was extremely the same, even the smallest details. Inside the house, there were several small dolls. Catherine felt so lonely and oppressed by her possessive friend that dollhouse became her best company. But Catherine was careful not to let Elise know about it. Otherwise, Elise would destroy the dollhouse or even burn it. Elise had a horse that she loved. It was a gift from her mother. One day this horse died, and she was very sad. She was so depressed that she didn't want to feed. It was the first time that Catherine saw sensitivity in her friend. She invited Elise to spend a month at her house to try to overcome the sadness. Catherine's father wanted to do something to make his daughter's friend happy, so he made a wooden horse and put the horse's shoes and other belongings from Elise's horse inside the wooden horse so that Elise could feel him, close to him, and overcome the pain of loss. Elise asked to put the horse behind the dollhouse, and Catherine agreed to see her friend happy. Elise seemed to have become a better person after her horse died. She had become a sweet, kind girl. She wasn't that possessive girl anymore. Catherine was happy for her friend's good change. Elise had this good behavior for years. Until Catherine's birthday, my dear listeners, it seems that good things don't last for long, at least in some cases. On Catherine's 17th birthday, her father prepared a big party and invited relatives, friends, and neighbors. And at that party, Catherine met the sweet and kind Olivia. They had a good conversation at the party. Catherine showed Olivia the room and the dollhouse she had since she was 9 years old. They had a friendship connection. Elise was mad with rage because Catherine wasn't paying any attention to her. During the whole party, Catherine was so happy to meet a new friend that she forgot to pay attention to Elise. So Elise went back to being that possessive girl, like she was before, actually worse than she was before. The next day, Elise was so angry, she went into Catherine's room, locked the door and pushed her on the floor and started physically attacking her, until Catherine's brother heard the noise and broke the door and helped his sister. Then Catherine's father forbade Elise to go to their house and forbade her to approach his daughter. Now Catherine is free to befriend whomever she wants. She and Olivia have begun to have a healthy friendship. 5 months passed, and Catherine's father was traveling to Paris on work. That afternoon, Catherine's brother went to visit his girlfriend to organize the wedding preparations because in 2 weeks he was going to get married. It was the perfect time for Elise as Catherine was home alone. And that afternoon, Elise broke into the house, entered the room, and began to attack Catherine. Then she walked towards the dollhouse to destroy it. Catherine pushed her, and accidentally Elise hit her head on the floor and died with her gaze fixed on the dollhouse. It was a terrifying and traumatic moment for Catherine. She was just trying to defend herself. It was an incident. She would never have done anything to harm anyone. Catherine spent 3 years blaming herself for what happened. She was traumatized. Until one day, she got over the trauma that she went through in her life. She found a good man and got married, and went to live in Paris, France. She left the dollhouse in her room at her father's house. Despite the trauma she went through, she still loved the dollhouse very much because it was a gift that her father made with great care, with his own hands. After her father's death, she returned to Brussels to get the dollhouse as she was 5 months pregnant. Catherine felt that the baby would be a girl. She wanted to pass the dollhouse on to her daughter when she was born. Upon getting there and entering her old room, it was quite emotional for Catherine, remembering all the good and bad times she lived in her old house, when suddenly she hears a female voice saying, "Finally, you came back to join me." Catherine's body shuddered. And finally the person with the mysterious voice appeared and entered the bedroom door. The person was none other than Elise. Catherine started screaming as she thought it was something paranormal, as Elise was dead. As impossible as it seems, she survived. On the day of Elise's supposed death, after she was taken from Catherine's room by the medical authorities at the time, she woke up. Only one doctor saw that she had survived, so Elise begged him to keep it a secret, and he did. Elise did this because she intended to get revenge. Elise has clearly become the human version of evil. She doesn't understand that what happened years ago was an accident. Catherine never intended to kill her. Elise felt betrayed by Catherine. She thought she had spent her childhood and her entire adolescence dedicating her life to caring for and protecting her friend. This is a clear example of how a possessive person acts. They have a distorted view of reality. During the years when everyone thought Elise was dead, she was shadowing Catherine and plotting revenge. Before Catherine arrived at the house, Elise prepared the entire house with flammable liquid for fire. Catherine's cries and screams asking for mercy, but that meant nothing to her. So Elise said, "We will die together." Then she locked Catherine in her room and went down to the basement and started a fire while Catherine screamed for help. She had no way of getting out through the windows. Because Elise had locked it out, the house had good sound insulation, so no neighbors could hear the cries for help. After starting the fire in the basement of the house, Elise returns to the room, locks the door, and starts another fire in the room. Desperate, Catherine tries to take the keys from Elise's hand. Catherine knew that if she didn't fight, she wouldn't get out of there alive. She fights with all her strength to try to survive. Catherine starts a fight against Elise to try to save her own life. She tries to take the room key from Elise's hand, taken by the willpower to survive. Catherine pushes Elise against the floor. She hits her head and faints. Quickly, Catherine takes the key and leaves the room and locks the door. Finally, Catherine manages to leave the house, and with no strength, she drags herself along the street asking for help. Elise woke up from fainting, walked slowly with a dark look. It was as if she was the reincarnation of evil. The fire had already spread throughout the house and throughout the room. Elise continues walking through the fire with slow steps towards the window. Through the window, she stares at Catherine, who is outside. Then Elise is consumed by fire as she screams. The scream was terrifying and evil that convey anger and spite. Everyone in the neighborhood could hear. Catherine wept in deep sadness as Elise was her friend and had turned into a bad person. Despite all the harm her friend had caused, she still wished Elise well, but unfortunately it was not possible. The next day, amid the ashes that remained of Catherine's house, Elise's remains were found, and Catherine's dollhouse was also found intact in perfect condition. Everything around it was destroyed by fire except the house of dolls. Something supernatural prevented the dollhouse from being destroyed by fire, so Catherine had a shed built on one of the family's properties to store the dollhouse. She wrote a letter explaining to the next generations of the family that they should stay away from touching or removing the dollhouse from the shed for their own safety. She made it clear that the house could be extremely dangerous. The neighbors who lived around the shed where the dollhouse was, they were very afraid. They said they heard screams and the footsteps of horses running around every night. Neighbors started a riot against Catherine's family. They said Catherine brought evil into his simple and quiet neighborhood. Catherine realized that wherever the doll's house was, evil would follow. So Catherine built a house in the middle of the forest. Where there were no inhabitants, the house was well structured, beautiful and large in a place literally in the middle of the forest. So Catherine took the doll's house and left it in the basement of the house. Generations and generations of the family passed over the years. and in 1958 the dollhouse was donated to a museum in England. In the 1950s, the city where the museum was located became famous. Everyone wanted to visit the museum to see the dollhouse. A rumor spread through town that Elise's spirit lived in the dollhouse. Now I will show you Catherine's real dollhouse. I personally went to the museum to record every detail of the house to show all of you. I filmed as much detail as I could. The dollhouse has a lot of detail. As you can see, the dollhouse is in excellent condition. Over the years, the house has received some repairs. Inside the house, there are several miniatures of furniture. Because of the glass in the windows of the house, I had a little difficulty filming. Inside the house are many small dolls. This is the wooden horse I told you about. As I tell in the story, the wooden horse was placed behind the house. Behind the house, there is a beautiful staircase. At that moment, I brought the camera very close to the window, so I could film inside the house. In the video description, I put the address of the museum, and I also explain what is actually real in this story I told you.